They called her the Hollow Wolf. For 8 years, Kestrel Vane had lived a lie so complete that even her own heartbeat believed it. She scrubbed their floors. She swallowed their insults. She let them believe she was broken, a wolf less omega cursed by the moon goddess herself. But Kestrel was not empty. She was a vault. And inside that vault prowled a beast so ancient, so terrifying, that her dying mother had made her swear to never let it out. "Hide it," her mother had whispered with her last breath. "They will come for you if they know." So Kestrel hid. She starved her wolf. She buried her power so deep that some days she almost forgot it existed. But when Marcella Corvin accuses her of a crime punishable by death, Kestrel faces an impossible choice: die with her secret, or unleash the monster before the Alpha King himself. The vault is about to crack open, and what comes out will make the entire Iron Veil Pack wish they had been kinder. The servant quarters of the Iron Veil Pack house smelled of mildew and resignation. Kestrel woke before dawn, as she always did, her thin blanket doing little to ward off the autumn chill seeping through the cracked walls. She was 20 years old, though most days she felt ancient. She dressed quickly in the gray uniform of the household staff, a shapeless tunic that hung off her narrow frame. The fabric was rough against her skin, a constant reminder of her place in the hierarchy. She caught her reflection in the warped tin mirror nailed to the wall. Pale, gaunt, unremarkable. Good. Invisible was safe. Kestrel made her way down the back staircase, keeping her footsteps silent. The main house was stirring. She could hear the cooks clattering pots in the kitchen and the distant rumble of guards changing shifts at the front gate. She slipped into the east corridor, her bucket and scrub brush in hand, hoping to finish the floors before the family woke. She did not get her wish. Well, the voice slithered down the hallway like oil on water. The ghost girl rises. Kestrel's stomach clenched. She kept her eyes on the marble tiles beneath her feet. Marcella Corvin emerged from the shadows, flanked by 2 Omega girls who had long ago learned that siding with the bully was safer than becoming the target. Marcella was the Beta's only daughter, a willowy brunette with sharp cheekbones and sharper cruelty. She wore a silk robe that cost more than Kestrel would earn in a decade. "I asked the kitchens to send breakfast to my room an hour ago." Marcella stopped directly in front of Kestrel, forcing her to halt. "It never arrived." "I am not assigned to the kitchens," Kestrel said quietly, her gaze still lowered. "I clean the east wing." "Are you talking back to me?" "No, Beta Marcella. I was only—" The slap came fast. Kestrel's head snapped to the side, her cheek stinging with the imprint of Marcella's palm. She tasted copper where her teeth had cut the inside of her lip. Deep inside, something stirred. A rumble echoed in the darkness of her chest, ancient and furious. Kestrel crushed it instantly, shoving it back into the vault with practiced precision. "Not now. Not ever." "Look at me when I speak to you," Marcella hissed. Kestrel raised her eyes. She made them empty, made them dull, made them the eyes of a girl with no wolf and no fight left. Marcella smiled, satisfied. "Better. Now, since you clearly have nothing useful to do, you can clean my chambers. I had a guest last night." She leaned closer, her breath warm against Kestrel's bruised cheek. "It is quite the mess." The 2 Omega girls giggled. Kestrel nodded once. "Yes, Beta Marcella." Marcella flicked her fingers in dismissal and sauntered off, her entourage trailing behind. Kestrel waited until their footsteps faded before releasing the breath she had been holding. Her hands were trembling, not from fear, from the effort of keeping the beast caged. 8 years. She had survived 8 years of this by being nothing, by disappearing into the walls. Her mother's warning echoed in her skull every single day. The silver wolves were hunted. The Order of the Pure Dawn had slaughtered her bloodline to near extinction. If anyone discovered what she truly was, they would not just kill her. They would burn her alive in the town square as a warning to any others who might be hiding. So Kestrel picked up her bucket, swallowed the blood in her mouth, and walked toward Marcella's chambers. Survival meant silence. But even vaults had their limits. The Iron Veil Pack was buzzing with anticipation. Tonight was the Ember Moon Gala, the annual gathering where alliances were forged and fated mates were revealed. Alphas from a dozen territories would descend upon the estate. More importantly, for the first time in 15 years, the Alpha King himself had accepted the invitation. Lorcan Vale. The name rippled through the pack like a stone dropped in still water. Kestrel heard the servants whispering as she scrubbed the banquet hall floors. He had not left his fortress in the northern mountains since the massacre that killed his family. Some said he was scarred beyond recognition. Others claimed he had gone feral, more beast than man. All agreed on one thing. He was the most powerful wolf alive, and he was coming here. Kestrel tried to ignore the flutter beneath her ribs. She had no business thinking about Alpha Kings or galas. She was furniture. She was invisible. Tonight, while the elite danced and drank, she would be polishing silver in the pantry where no one could see her. Still, a small, treacherous part of her wondered what he looked like. Dreaming again, Hollow Wolf? Kestrel flinched. Draven Ashford stood in the doorway, silhouetted by the afternoon light streaming through the tall windows. He was the Alpha's eldest son, heir to the Iron Veil territory, 24 years old with the kind of cruel beauty that made Omegas swoon and wise wolves run. Kestrel despised him. "Apologies, Alpha Draven," she murmured, scrubbing faster. "I was just finishing." Draven crossed the room, his boots clicking against the marble. He stopped beside her, close enough that she could smell his cologne, sandalwood, and arrogance. "You missed a spot," he said. He tipped her bucket with his foot. Soapy water flooded across the tiles she had just cleaned, soaking her uniform, spreading in a gray lake around her knees. Inside the vault, the beast slammed against its bars. Kestrel breathed, counted to 5, forced the creature back down. "I will clean it again," she whispered. Draven crouched beside her, gripping her chin and forcing her face upward. His gray eyes searched hers, looking for defiance, looking for anything he could punish. "You are pathetic," he said softly. "A 20-year-old Omega with no wolf. Do you know what the pack calls you? A genetic dead end. A mistake the moon goddess should have erased." Kestrel said nothing. Draven released her chin with a shove that sent her sprawling backward into the puddle. He straightened, adjusting his cuffs. "Stay out of sight tonight," he ordered. "The Alpha King does not need to see our garbage." He walked away without looking back. Kestrel sat in the cold water, her heart pounding, the silver creature inside her howling silently in its cage. Tonight. The Alpha King would be here tonight. And tomorrow, life would return to its endless gray routine of survival. She had no way of knowing that by midnight, everything would shatter. The gala was a hurricane of silk and candlelight. Kestrel watched from the servants' corridor, peering through a crack in the door as hundreds of wolves in glittering finery swept across the ballroom floor. The chandeliers blazed with 1,000 crystals. The air was thick with the scent of expensive perfume and dominant pheromones. She should have stayed in the pantry. She knew that. But something had drawn her here, a magnetic pull in her gut that she could not explain. And then she saw him. Lorcan Vale stood at the edge of the crowd, untouched by the chaos swirling around him. He was tall, broad-shouldered, dressed in a black suit that absorbed the light. A jagged scar ran from his left temple to his jaw, but it did not diminish him. It made him look like what he was. A predator who had survived attempts to kill him and had destroyed those who tried. His eyes were the color of molten gold, and they were scanning the room, as if searching for something. Kestrel's inner beast surged forward so violently that she gasped aloud, clutching the door frame. No, 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 no. She shoved the creature back with every ounce of willpower she possessed, but the damage was done. Across the ballroom, Lorcan's head snapped toward the servants' corridor. His nostrils flared. Their eyes met through the narrow gap in the door. Kestrel's blood turned to ice. She stumbled backward, her heart slamming against her ribs, and fled down the corridor toward the kitchens. She did not see Lorcan take a step in her direction before a dignitary intercepted him. She burst into the pantry, pressing her back against the cold stone wall, breathing in ragged gasps. What was that? What had just happened? The monster in her chest was pacing frantically, whining, clawing, and desperate in a way Kestrel had never felt before. Before she could make sense of it, the pantry door crashed open. 2 guards seized her by the arms, dragging her off her feet. What? Let go of me. Kestrel struggled, but they were betas, far stronger than a supposed wolf-less omega. They hauled her through the kitchen, past the shocked staff, and shoved her through the ballroom doors. The music stopped. 500 heads turned toward the commotion. Kestrel hit the polished floor on her hands and knees, her gray servant's uniform soaked and filthy, her hair falling loose around her face. The silence was suffocating. "This is the one!" Marcella's voice rang out, high and triumphant. Kestrel looked up. Marcella stood beside an elderly wolf seated in a wheeled chair. Elder Thaddeus, one of the pack's most respected counselors, his face pale as death, bandages wrapped around his throat. "This Omega attacked Elder Thaddeus in his chambers an hour ago," Marcella announced to the crowd. She tried to tear out his throat. "That is a lie!" Kestrel shouted, scrambling to her feet. "I have never—" "Silence!" Alpha Ashford thundered from the dais. Draven stood beside his father, his expression unreadable, though Kestrel caught the faintest curl at the corner of his lips. This was a setup. She understood it instantly. They were framing her. And then, from the edge of the crowd, a deep voice cut through the chaos. "This accusation carries a death sentence." Lorcan Vale stepped forward, his lupine stare fixed on Kestrel. "I will oversee the trial myself." The great hall had transformed into a courtroom. Kestrel stood in the center of a circle of witnesses, her wrists bound in iron chains that burned against her skin. Wolfsbane-laced metal, designed to suppress a shifter's beast. The irony was not lost on her. They thought she had no wolf to suppress. Alpha Ashford presided from his throne, Draven at his right hand, Marcella seated smugly among the spectators. Elder Thaddeus sat in his wheeled chair, bandages fresh, his eyes avoiding Kestrel entirely. Lorcan Vale had taken position near the eastern pillar, arms crossed, watching with an intensity that made Kestrel's skin prickle. "The accusation has been made," Alpha Ashford announced. "Kestrel Vane, Omega of no lineage, stands accused of attempted murder against a pack elder. The punishment, if found guilty, is death by silver flame." Murmurs rippled through the crowd. "I did not do this," Kestrel said, her voice steady despite the terror clawing at her chest. "I was cleaning the east wing. I never entered Elder Thaddeus's chambers." "Lies!" Marcella spat, rising from her seat. "I saw her fleeing his corridor with blood on her hands." "There was no blood. I was scrubbing floors." "Enough." Draven stepped forward, silencing her with a raised hand. He descended from the dais, circling her slowly, his boots echoing in the hushed hall. "We have a witness, we have a victim, and we have you, a wolf, less nobody with no alibi, and no one to speak for you." He stopped in front of her, tilting his head. "Did you really think you mattered, Kestrel? Did you think anyone would believe you over a beta's daughter?" Kestrel's throat tightened. She looked around the room, searching for a single friendly face. The servants would not meet her eyes. The Omegas she had shared meals with stared at the floor. She was utterly alone. "There is one way to settle this." Lorcan's voice cut through the tension. Every head turned toward the Alpha King. He pushed off from the pillar and walked toward the circle, his presence commanding immediate silence. "Pack law permits a trial of Fang when evidence is disputed," Lorcan continued. "The accused may fight to prove their innocence. If the moon goddess favors them, they survive. If not..." He let the implication hang. Alpha Ashford shifted uncomfortably. "With respect, Alpha King, she has no wolf. A trial of Fang would be execution by another name." "Then she may choose a champion," Lorcan said, his amber gaze never leaving Kestrel's face. "Unless she wishes to fight for herself." Draven laughed, a cold, mocking sound. "A champion? Who would fight for a hollow wolf? She is worthless. She has always been worthless." He leaned close to Kestrel, his breath hot against her ear. "No one is coming to save you," he whispered. "You will burn tonight." Kestrel closed her eyes. 8 years of hiding, 8 years of silence. And it had led her here, to die for a crime she did not commit. Unless... Inside the vault, the creature lifted its head. "I will fight for myself." The words left Kestrel's mouth before she could stop them. The hall erupted in whispers, then laughter. Draven stepped back, incredulous. "You?" He gestured at her frail frame, her bound wrists, and her servant's rags. "You cannot even shift. This is suicide." "Then it should be quick," Kestrel said quietly, "and you will have your entertainment." Alpha Ashford exchanged a glance with Lorcan, who gave a single nod. The Alpha shrugged. "Very well. The trial of Fang will commence at midnight in the stone circle. Marcella Corvin, as the accuser, may choose the pack's champion." Marcella's smile was venomous. "I choose Draven." Of course she did. Draven was the strongest fighter in Iron Vale, undefeated in 12 trials. He had killed 3 wolves in the circle without breaking a sweat. Kestrel was marched to a holding cell beneath the Great Hall. The guards threw her inside and locked the iron door without a word. She sat on the cold stone floor, her back against the wall, and finally let herself breathe. The silver beast was fully awake now, pacing restlessly, filling her skull with images of blood and vengeance. "I know," Kestrel whispered to the creature. "I know." For 8 years, she had kept her promise. She had starved her wolf, hidden her power, and lived as less than nothing to survive. But her mother had never anticipated this. Die with the secret, or break the vow to live. Kestrel pressed her palm against her chest, feeling her heartbeat thunder beneath her ribs. "Forgive me, Mother." The moon rose. Midnight came. The stone circle was an ancient arena carved into the cliffs behind the pack house. Torches lined the perimeter, casting flickering shadows across the frozen ground. The entire pack had gathered, hundreds of wolves crowded onto the stone benches, their breath misting in the frigid air. Kestrel was led into the circle, her chains removed. She stood barefoot on the icy earth, wearing only the thin tunic of a condemned prisoner. Across from her, Draven prowled in wolf form, a massive gray beast with shoulders like boulders and fangs like daggers. He was showing off, snapping theatrically for the crowd. Lorcan Vale watched from a raised platform, his expression unreadable. "Begin!" Alpha Ashford's voice boomed. Draven lunged. Kestrel did not run. She closed her eyes and opened the vault. The shift was not painful. It was release. 8 years of suppression, 8 years of starvation, and 8 years of chains crumbled in a single breath. Her bones sang as they realigned. Her skin rippled as fur erupted across her body. She grew and grew and grew, far beyond the size of a normal wolf. Draven's charge faltered. He skidded to a halt, his eyes widening in pure terror. Where the frail Omega had stood, a monster now rose. Kestrel's wolf was enormous, nearly 8 feet at the shoulder, towering over Draven like a dire wolf over a pup. Her fur was not gray or brown or black. It was pure, liquid silver, shimmering like moonlight made solid. Her eyes blazed gold, ancient and merciless. The crowd went silent. Then the screaming started. Omegas collapsed to their knees, unable to withstand the pressure of her aura. Betas trembled, whimpering, their wolves forcing them to submit. Even the alphas in attendance staggered, fighting against the primal command radiating from her very presence. Draven tried to run. Kestrel did not let him. She crossed the distance in a single bound, slamming into him with the force of an avalanche. Her jaws closed around his hind leg, and she whipped her head, sending him careening across the stone circle. He crashed into the arena wall with a sickening crunch. Kestrel stalked toward his crumpled form, a low rumble emanating from her chest. The sound cracked the stone beneath her massive paws. Draven shifted back to human form, clutching his mangled leg, blood pouring between his fingers. His arrogance was gone. His cruelty was gone. All that remained was a broken boy staring up at the monster he had tormented for 8 years. "Please," he whimpered. "Please, I yield, I yield." Kestrel loomed over him, her burning gold irises searing into his soul. She opened her jaws, and the roar that erupted shook the mountain itself. Every torch in the arena extinguished. Every wolf in attendance flattened against the ground, instinct overriding pride. And from the raised platform, a slow clapping began. Lorcan Vile descended into the stone circle, utterly unaffected by the aura that had brought an entire pack to its knees. He walked past the groveling wolves, past the trembling guards, past Alpha Ashford, who looked like he might faint. He stopped 10 feet from the silver wolf. Kestrel turned her massive head toward him, her luminous stare narrowing. The beast inside her recognized something in him. Not prey, not threat. Something else, something that made the creature pause. Lorcan did not bow, but he inclined his head, a gesture of respect between equals. "Argentum bloodline," he said, his voice carrying across the silent arena. "The silver wolves. I thought your kind had been extinct for 200 years. Kestrel's wolf rumbled, low and warning. "Easy," Lorcan murmured. He took another step closer, his wolf-bright stare meeting hers without fear. "I am not your enemy, little wolf. I have been searching for your bloodline for 15 years. Slowly, painfully, Kestrel forced herself to shift. The transformation was harder in reverse, the beast fighting to stay in control after so long in the cage. But she managed it, collapsing to her knees in the center of the circle, naked and shaking, her silver pale hair cascading around her shoulders. Lorcan shrugged off his black coat and draped it over her before anyone else could see. The fabric was warm, heavy, and smelled of pine and winter storms. He crouched beside her, one hand resting lightly on her shoulder. "Can you stand?" Kestrel nodded weakly. He helped her up, keeping her tucked against his side. "This woman," Lorcan announced, his voice thundering across the arena, "is innocent of the charges against her. The trial of Fang has proven the moon goddess's favor. Any further accusations against her are dismissed." "Now wait just a moment." Alpha Ashford sputtered, finding his voice. "She is a member of my pack. She attacked my son. Your son challenged her to a trial and lost," Lorcan interrupted coldly. "He lives only because she permitted it. I suggest you focus on gratitude rather than grievance." He turned his predator's gaze to Marcella, who was cowering behind a stone pillar. "You," Lorcan said softly. "You made a false accusation that nearly led to the execution of an Argentum wolf. Do you understand what that means?" Marcella's face was chalk white. I didn't know." "Ignorance is not a defense." Lorcan's voice dropped to a whisper that somehow carried further than a shout. If I discover you conspired with others to frame her, I will return, and I will not be merciful. He looked back at Alpha Ashford. This wolf is no longer a member of the Iron Veil Pack. She is under my protection as a ward of the Crown. Any attempt to harm her, reclaim her, or interfere with her will be considered an act of war against the Northern Throne. Ashford's jaw tightened, but he said nothing. He could not challenge the Alpha King openly. Not here. Not now. Lorcan guided Kestrel toward the arena exit. His Onyx Guard materialized from the shadows, 12 elite warriors in black tactical gear, forming a protective perimeter around them. As they passed Draven's broken form, Kestrel paused. She looked down at the male who had tormented her, humiliated her, and told her she was worthless for 8 years. He flinched away from her gaze. You were right about one thing, Kestrel said quietly. No one came to save me. She let a flicker of gold ignite in her eyes. I saved myself. Then she walked out of the Iron Veil territory, the Alpha King at her side, leaving the pack that had tried to destroy her in stunned, terrified silence. Kestrel woke to the sound of a crackling fire and the scent of cedar. She was lying in a bed softer than anything she had ever touched, buried beneath furs that seemed to trap warmth like a living thing. Her body ached, every muscle screaming from the shift she had suppressed for 8 years. She sat up slowly, her breath catching as she took in her surroundings. The chamber was carved directly into the mountain, the walls smooth obsidian veined with silver. Massive windows overlooked a valley blanketed in snow, peaks rising like jagged teeth against a pale morning sky. A fire roared in a stone hearth large enough to stand inside. Everything about the room whispered of ancient power and brutal elegance. You slept for 2 days. Kestrel's head snapped toward the voice. Lorcan Vale sat in a leather chair near the fire, a book open in his lap, watching her with that intense, unblinking focus. She clutched the furs to her chest. Where am I? The Obsidian Citadel. My home. He closed the book and set it aside. You are safe here. No one from Iron Veil can touch you. Why? Kestrel's voice cracked. Why would you protect me? You do not know me. Lorcan stood, moving to a table where a pitcher of water sat beside a plate of bread and dried fruit. He poured a glass and brought it to her, his movements deliberate and unhurried. I know what you are, he said, handing her the water. That is enough. Kestrel drank deeply, her throat raw. When she finished, she met his gaze. My mother told me the silver wolves were hunted to extinction. She said if anyone discovered what I was, they would kill me. Your mother was partially correct. Lorcan returned to his chair, leaning forward with his elbows on his knees. The Order of the Pure Dawn has spent 3 centuries exterminating the Argentum bloodline. They believe your kind is an abomination, a corruption of the moon goddess's design. Why? Because you cannot be controlled. Lorcan's lips curved into something that was not quite a smile. A silver wolf does not answer to pack hierarchy. Your aura can force any alpha to submit. You are not bound by the laws that govern the rest of us. To wolves who crave power and order, that makes you a threat. Kestrel set the glass down, her hands trembling. My mother never told me any of this. She just said to hide. She was protecting you the only way she knew how. Lorcan reached into his jacket and withdrew a silver pendant on a delicate chain. He held it up, letting it catch the firelight. The design was a crescent moon pierced by a single claw. This was recovered from your mother's body after the raid that killed her, Lorcan said quietly. She was not a random victim, Kestrel. She was Seraphina Argentum, the last known princess of the Silver bloodline. She fled the Order 20 years ago while pregnant with you. The room spun. Kestrel gripped the edge of the bed, her breath coming in short gasps. That means You are not just a silver wolf? Lorcan rose and crossed to her, pressing the pendant into her palm. You are the last living heir to the Argentum throne. By ancient law, you outrank every alpha on this continent, including me. Kestrel stared at the pendant, her mother's pendant, and felt something inside her crack open. Not the vault. Something deeper. The foundation of everything she had believed about herself. I was a servant, she whispered. I scrubbed floors. You were a queen in hiding. Lorcan's voice was firm but gentle. And now you have a choice. I can train you to harness your power, to defend yourself against the order, to claim your birthright. Or I can give you gold and a new identity in the human world. You would never have to shift again. Kestrel looked at him, this scarred king who had plucked her from the ashes of her old life. If I stay, she asked, what happens? Lorcan held her gaze. War. The order will come for you. Iron Veil will not let the insult of your escape go unanswered. And every unmated alpha who witnessed your shift will be drawn to you like moths to a flame. He paused, his expression growing more serious. There is something else you should know. The oldest texts speak of Argentum wolves who could channel the moon goddess herself, summoning silver fire that burned only the corrupt. But that power has not been seen in 500 years. If it manifests in you, it could change everything. And if I run, you survive. Maybe. But you will spend the rest of your life hiding, and your wolf will eventually consume you from the inside. Kestrel closed her fingers around the pendant. I am done hiding. 3 weeks passed in the Obsidian Citadel. Lorcan assigned his finest warriors to train Kestrel in combat, both in human form and wolf. She learned to control her shift, to summon her beast without losing herself to its fury. She learned to fight with claws and fang, to use her aura as a weapon rather than an uncontrolled explosion. She was eating dinner alone in her chambers when the alarm bells began to toll. Kestrel was on her feet instantly, the silver creature inside her surging to the surface. She raced through the corridors, following the sound of shouting until she reached the main hall. Lorcan stood at the center of the room, surrounded by his onyx guard. Across from him, flanked by a dozen Iron Veil warriors, stood Draven Ashford. He was walking with a limp, his leg still healing from the trial, but his eyes burned with a fury that made Kestrel's stomach clench. You have no authority here, Ashford, Lorcan said coldly. Leave before I have you removed in pieces. I invoke the right of reclamation, Draven spat. She was promised to me. My father arranged a mating contract when we were children. It was never dissolved. Kestrel felt the blood drain from her face. That is a lie. Is it? Draven pulled a rolled parchment from his coat and threw it at Lorcan's feet. My father's signature. Her mother's signature. Witnessed by 3 elders. She belongs to Iron Veil. She belongs to me. Lorcan did not touch the parchment. His keen stare flickered to Kestrel, a question in them. I never knew, Kestrel breathed. My mother never told me. Because she fled before the contract could be executed, Draven sneered. But blood law is blood law. The right of reclamation allows me to claim what is mine. She is not property, Lorcan warned, his aura flaring. The temperature in the room dropped 10 degrees. Draven held his ground, though sweat beaded on his forehead. Then let her prove it. Trial by combat. If she defeats my champion, the contract is void. If she loses, she returns to Iron Veil as my mate. And if she refuses, then she admits the contract is valid. Draven's smile was poison, and the Council of Elders will enforce it. Not even you can defy ancient law, Alpha King. Silence hung heavy in the hall. Kestrel stepped forward, her chin high. Who is your champion? Draven's smile widened. I am. You already lost to me once. That was a trial for your innocence. Draven's eyes glittered. This is a trial for your freedom. Different rules. I am permitted weapons. Silver weapons. The beast inside Kestrel snapped in fury. Silver was poison to their kind. A single cut could weaken her. A deep wound could kill her. Lorcan moved to her side, his voice low. You do not have to accept. We can fight this in the council. And spend months in legal battles while he parades that contract before every pack on the continent? Kestrel shook her head. No, I end this now. She looked at Draven, letting her eyes blaze with lupine fire. I accept. The combat arena beneath the obsidian citadel was older than the fortress itself. It had been carved into the mountain by the first wolves, a sacred space where disputes were settled in blood. The floor was black stone, worn smooth by centuries of battle. Torches lined the walls, casting dancing shadows across the assembled crowd. Word had spread. Alphas from 6 territories had arrived to witness the trial. The Council of Elders sat in elevated seats, their ancient faces impassive. This was not just a fight. It was a spectacle that would reshape the political landscape of the entire kingdom. Kestrel stood on the northern end of the arena, barefoot, wearing a simple black combat suit that allowed full range of movement. Her silver hair was braided back from her face. The pendant her mother had worn hung around her neck. Draven entered from the south, stripped to the waist, his muscled torso covered in tribal tattoos that marked his kills. In his right hand, he carried a short sword of pure silver. In his left, a silver dagger. The sight of the weapons made the beast inside Kestrel recoil. Nervous, Draven called across the arena. You should be. I have been waiting for this moment since you humiliated me. Kestrel said nothing. She breathed deep, centering herself, feeling her wolf coil in her chest like a spring. Elder Corvinus, the eldest of the council, rose from his seat. The terms are set. Draven Ashford fights to claim Kestrel Vane under the right of reclamation. Kestrel Vane fights for her freedom. The trial ends when one combatant yields, is incapacitated, or is dead. He raised a withered hand. Begin. Draven did not shift. He wanted to kill her as a human, to prove his dominance, to make the victory personal. He charged across the arena, silver blade singing through the air. Kestrel dodged the first slash by inches, feeling the burn of the silver even without contact. She spun away from the dagger thrust, her movements fluid, drawing on every hour of training Lorcan's warriors had drilled into her. But Draven was fast. Faster than he had been at Iron Vale. He had trained for this. He had prepared. The silver sword caught her across the ribs. Kestrel gasped as fire erupted along her side. Blood bloomed through her combat suit, the wound sizzling with silver poison. The crowd murmured. Someone shouted her name. Draven grinned, circling her. First blood. How does it feel, Hollow Wolf? How does it feel to burn? Kestrel pressed her hand to her side, her vision flickering. The silver was spreading through her system, weakening her, slowing the beast inside. I have been burned before, she said through gritted teeth, by words, by fists, by every person who looked at me like I was nothing. She straightened, ignoring the agony in her ribs. This is just pain, and pain I can survive. She shifted. The transformation was faster now, smoother. In 3 heartbeats, the massive silver wolf stood in her place, blood matting the fur along her flank, but her radiant stare undimmed by pain. Draven's confidence flickered. He raised his weapons, backing away. Kestrel lunged. She did not go for his throat. She went for his weapons. Her jaws closed around his sword arm, and she wrenched her head sideways. The crack of breaking bone echoed through the arena. Draven screamed, the silver sword clattering to the ground. He slashed wildly with the dagger, catching her shoulder. More fire. More poison. But Kestrel did not stop. She released his arm and slammed her massive paw into his chest, sending him flying across the arena. He crashed into the stone wall and crumpled to the ground, gasping for air. Kestrel stalked toward him, a thunderous vibration emanating from deep in her chest. Draven scrambled backward, clutching his mangled arm, his face twisted in terror. Wait! Wait! I yield! I yield! Kestrel stopped inches from his face. Her luminous gaze bore into his, and she let him see exactly what she was. Not the servant he had tormented. Not the hollow wolf he had mocked. A predator. A queen. A nightmare he would never escape. She shifted back to human form, standing over him naked and bleeding but utterly triumphant. "The contract is void," she said, her voice ringing across the silent arena. "I am no one's property. I never was." She turned to the Council of Elders. "Is it done?" Elder Corvinus nodded slowly, something like respect flickering in his ancient eyes. "It is done. Kestrel Vane is free." Lorcan appeared at her side, draping his coat over her shoulders as he had done before. His hand rested on her lower back, steadying her as the silver poison weakened her legs. "Get him out of my citadel," Lorcan ordered his guards. "If he ever returns, kill him on sight." The Onyx Guard dragged Draven's broken form from the arena. As he passed Kestrel, he spat at her feet. "This is not over," he hissed. "The Order knows about you now. They are coming, and when they burn you alive, I will be there to watch." Kestrel met his gaze without flinching. "Then I will save you a seat in the ashes." The guards hauled him away. The crowd erupted in whispers, some awed, some fearful. An Argentum wolf had returned. The balance of power had shifted. And somewhere in the shadows, messengers were already riding toward the Order of the Pure Dawn. The healers worked on Kestrel for hours, drawing the silver poison from her wounds with poultices and ancient chants. By the time they finished, she was exhausted, barely able to keep her eyes open. Lorcan stayed. He sat beside her bed, silent, watching her breathe. When the last healer left, he finally spoke. "You could have died." Kestrel turned her head to look at him, but I did not. "That is not the point." His voice was rough, raw in a way she had never heard. "When he cut you, when I saw the blood." He stopped, jaw clenching. Kestrel studied his face, the scar that ran from temple to jaw, the fierce intensity in his eyes that had witnessed centuries of war, the tension in his shoulders that spoke of a man barely holding himself together. "You were worried about me," she said softly. "I was terrified for you." He met her gaze, and for the first time, the mask of the Alpha King slipped. Beneath it was just a man, scarred and lonely, who had found something worth protecting. "I have not felt terror in 15 years, Lorcan continued. "Not since the night my family burned. I thought that part of me was dead. And then you walked into that arena and He stopped again, shaking his head. Kestrel reached out and took his hand. His fingers were calloused, warm, and strong. He stiffened at her touch, then slowly relaxed. "I did not ask you to save me," she whispered. "But you did anyway. Why?" Lorcan was silent for a long moment. Then he raised her hand to his lips and pressed a kiss to her knuckles. "Because my wolf recognized you the moment I saw you through that servant's door," he said quietly. "You are my mate, Kestrel. I have known since the gala. I have been fighting it because you deserved the choice I never had." Kestrel's heart stuttered. The pull she had felt, the magnetic draw, it had not been fear or adrenaline. It had been the bond. "And if I choose you?" she asked. Lorcan's eyes smoldered with restrained fire. "Then the moon goddess help anyone who tries to take you from me." Kestrel pulled him closer, and when their lips met, the bond between them ignited like wildfire. They came 3 nights later. Kestrel woke to the smell of smoke and the sound of screaming. She was on her feet before her eyes fully opened, the silver creature inside her surging to the surface. Lorcan was already gone, his side of the bed cold. She grabbed a blade from the bedside table and ran. The obsidian citadel was under siege. Flames licked the eastern towers. Bodies of onyx guard littered the corridors, throats slit, chests pierced with silver arrows. The attackers wore white masks painted with a rising sun, the order of the pure dawn. Kestrel fought her way toward the great hall, cutting down 2 masked soldiers who lunged at her from the shadows. The silver in their weapons burned her palms, but she did not slow. She burst through the hall doors and froze. Lorcan was on his knees, silver chains wrapped around his wrists and throat. A dozen order soldiers surrounded him, their crossbows aimed at his heart. Standing before him was a woman in white robes, her face hidden behind an ornate sun mask. "The last Argentum," the woman said, her voice melodic and cold. "We have been hunting your bloodline for 300 years, and now, finally, the purge will be complete." "Let him go," Kestrel bit out. The woman laughed. "The Alpha King? He is merely bait, child. We knew you would come for him. The mate bond is so predictable." She raised a hand, and a soldier pressed a silver blade to Lorcan's throat. Blood trickled down his skin. "Shift, and he dies," the woman said. "Surrender, and I will make his death quick. Resist, and I will make you watch him burn before I take your head." Kestrel's mind raced. A dozen soldiers, silver weapons, Lorcan incapacitated. The odds were impossible. But she was not just any wolf. She closed her eyes and reached deeper than she ever had before, past the vault, past the wolf, into the core of her bloodline. She felt something ancient stir, something that had been sleeping since before the first pack was formed. The voice of the moon goddess herself. "You are my daughter," the voice whispered, "my chosen, my blade in the darkness. Show them." Kestrel opened her eyes. They were no longer gold. They were silver, blazing like twin moons. Light erupted from her body, pure and blinding. The soldiers screamed, dropping their weapons, clawing at their eyes. The silver chains around Lorcan splintered like glass. The masked woman stumbled backward, her composure cracking. "Impossible! You are just a wolf." "I am the last Argentum," Kestrel said, her voice layered with power, echoing with the weight of generations. "I am the daughter of the moon, and you have made a terrible mistake." She did not shift. She did not need to. She raised her hand, and silver fire erupted from her palm. It swept through the hall like a living thing, consuming the order soldiers, burning through their white robes, reducing them to ash in heartbeats. They did not have time to scream. The masked woman tried to run. Kestrel appeared in front of her, moving faster than any wolf should be able to move. 300 years, Kestrel said softly. 300 years of hunting my kind. My mother, my grandmother. Every silver wolf who just wanted to live. She grabbed the woman by the throat and lifted her off the ground. "It ends tonight." The silver fire consumed her. When the flames died, Kestrel stood alone in the ruined hall. The Onyx Guard poured in, securing the citadel, extinguishing the remaining fires. Healers rushed to Lorcan, removing the remnants of the silver chains. But Lorcan only had eyes for Kestrel. He crossed the hall and pulled her into his arms, crushing her against his chest. "You saved me," he breathed. "We are even now." Kestrel's voice was shaking, the divine power fading, leaving her drained but alive. "You saved me first." Lorcan pulled back just enough to look at her face. Blood and soot streaked her skin. Her silver eyes had faded back to violet. She had never looked more beautiful. "Marry me," he said. Kestrel blinked. "What?" "Marry me. Be my queen. Not because of politics or bloodlines or ancient law. Because I cannot imagine another day without you. Despite everything, Despite the death and the fire and the bodies cooling around them, Kestrel laughed. You could not have asked somewhere more romantic? I am not a patient man. Lorcan's lips curved. And I have learned that tomorrow is not guaranteed. Kestrel cupped his face in her hands. Yes. 6 months later, the kingdoms gathered. The great hall of the obsidian citadel had been rebuilt, grander than before. Banners of silver and black hung from the rafters. Dignitaries from every pack on the continent filled the galleries, their faces a mixture of awe and reverence. Kestrel stood at the top of the dais, dressed in a gown of white silk threaded with silver that seemed to glow in the torchlight. A crown of woven moonstone rested on her brow. Beside her, Lorcan wore the black ceremonial armor of the Alpha, King, his hand clasped firmly in hers. Below them, kneeling on the cold stone floor, was Marcella Corvin. The investigation had revealed that Marcella herself had hired a rogue to wound Elder Thaddeus, staging the entire accusation to eliminate Kestrel before the gala. The former Beta's daughter had been stripped of her rank and sentenced to serve the crown for the rest of her days. She did not dare look up. In the distant gallery, Draven Ashford watched from the shadows. His arm had healed crooked, a permanent reminder of his defeat. He had been exiled from Iron Vale after his father's death, a lone wolf with no pack and no future. He met Kestrel's eyes across the hall. She did not gloat. She did not smirk. She simply looked through him, as if he were nothing. Because he was. Citizens of the Northern Realm, Lorcan's voice boomed across the hall. I present to you my mate, my equal, my queen, Kestrel Argentum, the Silver Wolf reborn. The crowd erupted in cheers. Wolves howled in celebration, the sound echoing off the mountain peaks. Kestrel looked out at the sea of faces. She remembered the cold floor of the Iron Vale packhouse. She remembered scrubbing Marcella's chambers. She remembered Draven's boot on her bucket, his voice calling her worthless. She remembered hiding, starving, surviving. And she smiled. The servant girl was gone. The hollow wolf was a memory. The queen had risen, and the entire kingdom knelt at her feet. If you love this story and want more tales of revenge, romance, and wolves who refuse to stay down, smash that subscribe button and hit the notification bell. Thanks for watching.